is a special meeting of the Guilderland Central School District Board of Education on October 2nd, 2019. Would everyone please silence their cell phones and stand for the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Special meeting to interview candidates for an open seat created by the resignation of Mr. Christine Hayes on August 1st, 2019. The board's using a process it's used in the past to fill this vacant seat. The board is interviewing individuals who have expressed an interest in serving a term that will begin on October 15th, 2019 and end on May 19th, 2020. The board will be interviewing candidates this evening. The meeting is televised and being recorded. Immediately following the interviews, the board will meet in executive session to discuss the candidates. The candidates will know the outcomes of the interviews before the next board meeting so they can be appointed on October 15th. I will hand it over to our students. We have Shashank Shamshabad, a junior at Guilderland High School. He is our moderator tonight. And we have Matt Gunnigan, a junior at the high school, who is our timekeeper.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dara. Tonight we have 5 candidates who have expressed an interest in being appointed to the open seat on the Board of Education. The candidates have been randomly selected to determine the order in which they will answer each of the questions. For example, Mr. McKinney will respond to the first question, then Ms. Blasiak will answer first on the second question, and so on. You will each have 3 minutes to answer the first question. Our timer will hold up the yellow card when you have 30 seconds left, and the red card when you are out of time. Please be sure to wrap up your comments when your time is up. Question number 1. We'll start with Mr. McKinney. Please take a few moments to introduce yourself. As you tell us about yourself, be sure to share information about your background, including your qualifications for and interest in serving on the Guilderland Board of Education. Also be sure to comment on any ways you participate in board-sponsored activities, such as community conversations, public meetings on topics such as budget, priority meetings, etc.
Good evening. My name is John McKinney. Most people know me as Jack. I've lived in the Guilderland School District with my lovely wife for over 30 years. We've raised 3 children. They've all gone through the Guilderland District. They've been involved in all of the activities here, both with the arts, music, and athletics. During their tenure at school, my wife and I were very involved with what was going on. And since then, we've been a little less involved physically, but we've been involved looking at what has been happening. We stay up with what goes on by reading the newspaper and so forth. My qualifications that I felt would bring me to be an asset to the board is that I've been involved in education for over 41 years. I started off as an elementary school teacher. I was also a junior high math and high school math teacher. I taught special education. I became the director of special ed. Following that, I was appointed as the assistant superintendent of business, and I retired as the superintendent of schools in the Green Island School District. So all told, I spent 41 years from the beginning of my teaching career to the end of my teaching career at the Green Island School District. Following my retirement, the Hudson City School District asked me to come back because of the death of their business administrator, and at that time I filled in for them for another 1.5 years until they were able to secure a full-time appointment. During that time, I was involved in all the various facets of running a school district. I was involved with transportation and cafeteria, special ed, negotiations with teachers, negotiations with the non-instructional staff. I was responsible for the cafeteria, making sure that everything was done there, and many other areas. So I'd like to thank the board for this opportunity. I wish my fellow candidates the best, and especially thank the students for being here tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Braziak is up next.
Hi, I'm Kim Blasiak. I'm a Guilderland resident. I currently have 4 children in the district, 2 at Pine Bush, 1 at Farnsworth, and 1 at Guilderland High School. Right now, I guess why I wanted to do this position, I am currently very active in Guilderland PTA. I'm the president of the Guilderland PTA Council. I'm the treasurer of the Pine Bush Elementary PTA. I chartered the Guilderland Community Special Education PTSA. I'm co-president of that as well. Also, outside of that, I am the Family Engagement Coordinator for the New York State PTA. I'm on their board of directors. I am also on the New York State Department of Ed Task Force for Family Engagement. We're currently creating a new framework that will be implemented statewide. I also sit on the New York State Department of Ed Title I Commission of Practitioners. I'm a managing member of the New York State Family Engagement Coalition, which currently works with many different organizations across the state to engage our families and our schools to work together. And then also, if what I do and what I've been to, yeah, you all know me. So I've been to a lot of the meetings. I'm very vocal. I'm also a special ed advocate, a parent advocate. I sit down with a lot of families and go through plans for them. I sat on the facilities committee for Guilderland when they were going through their capital project as well. If I'm not at a board meeting, I'm watching it, which I actually just watched the last board meeting before I came here tonight. But I just really, truly believe that it needs to be a partnership. It has to be a partnership between the school and the families. I'm a huge believer of the it takes a village mentality, where we really need to be pulling all of our resources nowadays. Oh, I also sit on the Educational Conference Board as a member, and also their task force for the teacher shortage in New York State. We are currently trying to work with the ECB and with New York State Department of Ed to address this issue and maybe change certification for teachers, just make it a little bit more inviting to become a teacher in New York State. But I really am thankful for this opportunity. I genuinely love this community. I'm very vested in this community, very vocal in this community, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Mr. Buck, you're up.
Thank you. My name is Greg Buck. So I moved to Guilderland when I was in first grade, attended Linwood Elementary School, finished my schooling in the Guilderland district, graduated in 2006 from Guilderland High School, went on to the University of Rochester, where I majored in history and also did ROTC. So upon graduating from there, I was commissioned as an officer in the Marine Corps. Did that for 4 years, was stationed in Virginia, North Carolina. Once I got out, my wife, who's also a Guilderland grad, we decided we wanted to move back home, be closer to family. So we came back to Guilderland. I now work for National Grid in labor relations, company side. Couple reasons why I put my name in the ring is, one, as I mentioned, I'm a graduate of Guilderland. I had a wonderful experience here. I think it opened a lot of doors for me. And I think all children in the town and the community should have the same opportunities that I had. And I think it's important that we all work towards that end. Additionally, I have a 2-year-old daughter. She's going to be 2 in November. So although I don't have a child in the district currently, I obviously have a vested interest in seeing a successful school district moving forward for the next 18, 20, 25 years. It's one of the reasons, in addition to our family being here, one of the reasons we chose to come back to Guilderland specifically, not just the capital region, was because of the school system. And lastly, the other reason why I put my hat in the ring is I think Quality and equitable education, public education, is one of the most important facets of government, and we as citizens have to make sure that that is being provided to all our the children of our community. So, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Butterfield, you're up.
My name is Rebecca Butterfield. I'm a pediatrician, a mother of an 8th grader at Farnsworth, and a resident of Guilderland for the last 13 years. I think the reason I got interested in this position was because I really want to be able to serve my community in our mutual goal of making sure that all children in the district achieve their highest potential in an ever-changing community. As a pediatrician, I think I would bring a different perspective and a different area of expertise on child health and development. Every day in my professional life, I spend talking to children and to parents, and I think by doing that for so many years, I've really honed the skills of active listening and effective communication, both of which are really essential, I think, for board members. I also have a special interest in the impact of childhood trauma on child development and the impact of poverty. And I think both of those things are very important for school board members to know about and to be cognizant of. In terms of community involvement, recently I became involved in the school start time task force, and that's really what triggered my interest in these proceedings. I don't have a lot of community involvement in Guilderland, but I have a lot of community involvement in the city of Albany. So I'm involved in the multidisciplinary team at the Child Advocacy Center. That's a team comprised of law enforcement, child protective caseworkers, and patient and victim advocates in terms of really tasked at improving the process for child victims of either physical or sexual abuse. I'm also involved in the Child Fatality Task Force in Albany County that looks at every unexplained, unfortunate pediatric death in the community. I'm on the American Academy of Pediatrics Task Force on Poverty, looking at the impact of poverty specifically on child health and development and the impact of poverty on future health outcomes. So I really appreciate this opportunity to come and speak to you tonight. I really wish my candidates the best, and thank you for letting us talk.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez-Parker, you're up.
Thank you. My name, as stated here, is Blanca Gonzalez-Parker, and I am a graduate of the Guilderland school system, as is my husband. My in-law, my mother-in-law was a teacher for the district for many years, and we have 3 children who live with us in the district. We have a student, a daughter who is in 4th grade, and she goes to Pine Bush. We have a 6th grader in Farnsworth Middle School. And we have a daughter who would have been a 9th grader this year, but we withdrew her from Guilderland, and she's being homeschooled. It is that personal experience that I have as a parent and as a graduate of Guilderland, which sort of propels me to be here today. I feel like I've seen what's great about Guilderland, what's great about our school district, and I also see some areas for improvement. And I really would like the opportunity to work on that. I feel very vested in our community. I think some things are changing, and I have a similar background to Ms. Butterfield in that my background is in public health. I'm a nurse. I began as a nurse. I was an EMT and served this community for many years. And now as a parent, I'm trying to apply what I've learned professionally in the field of public health and nursing, as well as what I've learned through the social community and behavioral health aspects of public health. I would like to apply that to the education system. So things like start time, that's something I take very seriously, bullying, discrimination of any kind. I think it's really imperative to not only serve the community at large, but to sort of mix the community in such a way that it benefits our students. And so I would like to see more opportunities for our students. And now, I'm not trying to be negative in sharing my personal experience as a parent, but I think it's important to acknowledge the hard times that some of us as parents have had. And I present that to you respectfully as somebody that would like to come and be honest with you and have those open conversations and hopefully initiate change. In terms of my qualifications, in addition to being a nurse, I work for a labor management organization, and I am actually the program associate for safety and health So I deal with things like preparedness, active shooter violence, things like that. And it's very important for me to have balance because I represent both the state and the union, the largest union in the state. So I feel like I'm able to really look at both perspectives and make a sound decision that's not emotion-based. Lastly, I did work for the Epilepsy Foundation, teaching people about epilepsy, including nurses. And my role right now is focused on education for the state from the safety and health perspective. I also had experience in the area of school preparedness and was responsible for interviewing folks that responded to the Columbine shooting, unfortunately. So I do have some expertise in that area.
For each of the next questions, you will have 2.5 minutes. Our timekeeper will hold up the yellow card when you have 30 seconds left, and the red card when your time is up. Again, please be sure to wrap your comments up when the time is up. So we're going to question 2 right now. We'll start with Ms. Blasiak. What aspects of the Guilderland Central School District do you value most? What aspects would you like to see improved?
Pass. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, the teachers are kind of rock stars in my eyes with what they have to do because teachers nowadays are not expected to teach first and foremost. That's kind of in the middle. And it's not something that I say is coming from top down. It's just the way it is across our country right now. I think that we have just an amazing district that listens. Sometimes, I'm not going to lie, they don't, but I think that's anywhere you go. I think that we have just amazing students. I think that that is one of our greatest assets right now is our student base because they are going through so much now that we never did when we were in school. And it's so different for us to kind of sit and say, okay, this is what they should do when they are in this every single day and they're going through it. So I think just a lot of the things that our current students are doing are amazing. Just the groups that they're doing and just, I can't say enough about that. I do feel a huge sense of community here. And I mean, anytime you go to events at the schools, you do get that sense of community where people genuinely want to be there and they genuinely want to be part of it. I think that's a huge plus. Something that I would maybe like to work on with people, I don't want to say change because it's not up for me to change, to be honest. I think that has to be just a back and forth conversation. Right now, there are a lot of things going on in the schools that I think it needs to be an open dialogue, such as, I know we've talked about inclusion through the years. I know that cultural responsiveness has now come up. That's something we've talked about at Building Cabinet at the middle school. I think that those are things that we need to really touch upon more so as a community and definitely bring our students into that conversation because they're living it every day. So.
Thank you. Mr. Buck, you're up now.
Thank you. So I guess what I would say is most valued in the Guilderland School District would be just, again, the education that it provides and the opportunities it provides to all the children in our community from, classroom, intramurals or extracurricular activities, sports. When I was a student here, there was nothing that I couldn't do. Everything was an option here at Guilderland, and I think that's really important for all our kids so they have the ability to experience a wide range of things, find out what they like, what they're good at, move on, be successful later in life. One thing that I think all schools, including Guilderland, needs to maybe improve upon, we live in a system where we go to schools based on what neighborhood we live in. So therefore, it's very hard to change, diversity or increase diversity in our schools, but it's something that we all need to learn more about and we all need to become more involved in. So how can we improve that, teach our kids about that, get them to experience that based on this neighborhood school system? The residents are the residents, so the numbers are the numbers, the diversity is the diversity. So we have to find other ways to introduce our children to that sort of thing. That's something I'm really interested in, really passionate about. Would like to see some work done on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Butterfield, you're up.
I think Guilderland has so many strengths. My son transferred in from a parochial school into middle school, and we were nervous because he didn't know anyone and it was a whole new environment. But I was so impressed with Guilderland's emphasis on wellness, anti-bullying, substance abuse prevention, anxiety, relaxation techniques. That was really emphasized very early in the school year, and I thought that was so pivotal for preteens and teenagers. I also think Guilderland really emphasizes for each individual child to be an individual. So there isn't so much just an emphasis on grades and performing at the highest academic ability, but also if a student is a lover of the arts or of music or of extracurriculars, that's definitely emphasized, and I really greatly appreciate that. I also think Guilderland's strength is the participation of the parents. We had parent night last night, and it was full. Went until 8:30 on a Tuesday night, and I was really quite impressed by that. Just like Gregory said, I think any school district has areas of improvement. I think any big system really needs to emphasize continuous quality improvement so that there's always improvement happening. And I think two areas for Guilderland would be communication. It's hard in an ever-changing world to communicate effectively, especially with so many modes of communication now available to us. But I think parental communication could be better, and I think with a changing world, it could be improved. The other thing I think that as our world is changing, we could look at in the district is emphasizing that students should be citizens of the world. So being able to critically appraise, news, science, so that we're creating active citizens for their future adulthood.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez-Parker, you're up.
Thank you. I value the faculty that we have in Guilderland. I think we have some of the best teachers around. Now that I work for the state and I sort of see things at a different level, I really am very proud of the fact that I attended Guilderland. And I think my experience helped make me who I am today, for the good and for the bad. And I also value the opportunity for access to things that other school districts do not have access to. So things like IT equipment, what's happening here today, this is an example of something that does not happen in other districts. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity for my children. I do actually find in the middle of some things that I feel really could be improved, I do find that our district tends to be a leader, and it does tend to be open-minded, and I've always liked that about Guilderland. I think we're open-minded and we're proactive, and we get the job done as a community. Things that could be improved upon. One of the things that I had hoped would change from my experience going to this district, we get all our kids comfy when they're in elementary school, which is so important in terms of cognitive development. We get them all comfy, we have this sense of community, and then we throw them into Farnsworth Middle School when they're at their most vulnerable, which is adolescence. How many of us can look back and say we looked our best at that time or felt our best at that time? So it's the hardest time when we're trying to identify who we are, and at that point in time we're like, sorry, your best friend is going to be basically on a different continent, because I don't feel like there's a lot of interaction between the schools. And that is something that I feel really could be improved. I have heard the argument even within my own family that, hey, they have to learn to work with people who are different than them or make new friends, and it's a skill. Absolutely, it's a life skill. I just question the timing. So that is something I would definitely like to address.
Thank you. Mr. McKinney, you're up.
Being the last one to answer this question makes it very tough. I value all the things that the people here also said, but to try and put a little bit more to it, I also value the fact that the people sitting over there, the Board of Education, give up their time and their energy all throughout their term to make this district the best that they feel that it should be. I also value the administration. I was involved in it. You're caught between two places. You're caught between the faculty, you're caught between the board, you're caught between the residents. And you try and balance all of those things so that the school district thrives. The area that I think that I would like to emphasize as something, it's something that I see not just within this school district, but school district to school district, world leader to world leader, state leaders to people, is civility and respect. I think that if we can continue to promote civility and respect among our students and ourselves, that we would end up with a better world.
Thank you. We're moving on to the third question now. We'll start with Mr. Buck. How does the Board of Education balance the needs of the students, staff, and taxpayers?
Thank you. That's obviously the million-dollar question, right? So I think all pieces have an equal stake in our school district. You know, obviously the residents pay the taxes, but the children are the ones who have the most to gain or lose from their experience here in this school district. So I think every problem probably has to be looked at through all those lenses. Obviously, we could want to do a million things for the students, but if the residents don't approve it, ultimately it's not going to go anywhere. So we have to continue to try to do better for the students and families and residents, but also make sure that it's things that can actually get done. So that, I guess that would how I would answer that question. You have to kind of look at them all, balance them all, and try to find solutions that will work for everybody.
All right, thank you. Ms. Butterfield, you're up.
I think there's no perfect answer to that question. You have to marry your responsibility in terms of advocating for new programs and new technology with fiscal responsibility. And we all do this every day in our home life, in our professional lives. And some people are not going to be, satisfied completely with the outcome. But I think all we can do is do our best, listen to all the stakeholders involved, gather as much information as we can about the issue at hand, and then come up with a pragmatic but respectful decision. But I think it really would depend on exactly what the issue is.
All right, thank you. Ms. Gonzalez-Parker, you're up.
Thank you. I think compromise is essential, and we can't make all parties happy all the time, but we can sometimes come to a compromise. And for example, if you have a new idea and the taxpayers don't like it the first time, maybe you can amend it. I think that happened with the budget that you passed. I think it's called like the referendum or the big project, right? You had to sort of tailor that and then send it back. That happens at all levels of government. So, I mean, before a policy becomes a policy at the state level, it does that as well. So I respect that there's some trial and error here, but I think that's where you get new ideas. And I feel very strongly that we need to hear the voices of all the people in the community that are willing to share their voices. I do think that that is a problem that goes beyond this board. I don't know that you're hearing all of the the murmuring necessarily, or that people are attending your attempts to reach out to the community. That is something I would personally, like to assist with, but I do think that feedback is important, but very difficult to get. So I think in order to balance everything, you need to start with what the rules are. There are things beyond this board. There are rules, and you have to answer to the state requirements. And then beyond that, there's room for change and compromise, and looking at everybody's perspective.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. McKinney, you're up.
Well, I think that bringing all of the stakeholders, whether it's the students, the parents, the board, or just plain residents, into a dialogue will be the best way of doing it. I know personally, I was able to get a $10 million building project passed in the district that I was in because I was able to bring all of the various stakeholders into a conversation and show them why it was necessary for that building project to take place. And they left and went out and talked to their people, and that allowed this small village to pass a bond issue where they had to fund over $7 million of their own without state aid. So I think bringing all stakeholders into the conversation is the way to go to balance a school district.
Thank you. Ms. Blasiak, you're up.
Yes, this is a very hard question. I'll be perfectly honest. There's so many, we talk about stakeholders and we do have to have all the stakeholders involved, but at the same time, sometimes it's very frustrating when the stakeholders are invited and they're not at the table. So as a board, I've seen the board where the communication has been out there, the stakeholders have been invited, information has been sent out, and you can only lead them to water. That said, also with state requirements, things like that, it's very difficult, I'll be honest. I think sometimes I look and you have the parents and you have the administrators, you have the teachers, you have the students, you have the board. And I think sometimes the hardest thing is not all of the stakeholders know exactly what goes through the ripple effect. And when I say that, like I'll just pull one example. Last year there was state aid reimbursement that was cut from 80% to 47%. That's not something that all stakeholders genuinely know, but you had to work as a group to explain that in the budget process and work with the stakeholders, work with the parents, and work with the teachers, and work with the district to try to get that point across. I'm not going to sit here and think, oh yeah, it's going to be a great and wonderful thing. I mean, I'll say it to be on the board, not saying that I would hate it, but at the same time, it's so hard to get everyone together. Yes, we do need to have a community put together. We need to have everyone at the table. And I've seen that in Guilderland, where on the facilities committee, we went through that capital project so much piece by piece to the point where I could tell you probably every piece. And yet, unless someone is actually there feeling the pain, that's when it was actually brought down and it approved by our oh my goodness, I'm losing my words, I apologize, by our voters. It was when people started to feel the pain, like when students were talking about the science wings not having what they need, or like the gyms falling apart, or just basic things that you don't really think about on a day-to-day. So I'm not even sure if that fully answers the question, but I mean, yes, I still think that we need to all work together, all stakeholders, but I think that it's just very hard getting everyone together and really getting that point across as a community.
Thank you. We're going on to the fourth question now. Ms. Butterfield, you'll start. If you were to be selected as a new board member, what do you think will be the biggest challenges you would face? How will you overcome those challenges?
I think the biggest challenge that I would face is that this is a different environment for me. So I would have to educate myself a lot about school board policies and educate myself on the issues. But I'm a very quick learner, and if I commit to something, I really commit. So I would definitely be conscientious about learning as much as I could, and I wouldn't hesitate to phone a friend and ask for advice. But I think that would be the biggest challenge that I would face.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez-Parker, you're up.
My answer kind of builds upon the last answer, which is that I recognize that I will never be able to make everyone happy, and I would love to. I believe deeply in world peace and making everyone happy all the time, and that can't happen. But I'm not intimidated by the challenge, and I have a lot of experience working where I do right now, and as an advocate for patients, as a nurse, and I really feel like I can help make balanced decisions from multiple perspectives, and I'm ready to take on that challenge.
Thank you. Mr. McKinney, you're up.
I think the biggest challenge that I would see for me as a new board member would be the fact that I would be visible in the community and approachable in the community. So therefore, sometime when I'm in the grocery store, it may take more than an hour to do all the grocery shopping because people will stop and ask me questions and want information, or they'll want to tell me something. How would I address that challenge? I think I would do my best to smile and listen and try and bring that information back to the board.
All right, thank you. Ms. Blasiak, you're up.
I think my biggest challenge, to be honest, and you're going to laugh, would be explaining to my 12-year-old that, yes, Mom has another meeting. But no, I think I've seen enough of the Board of Ed meetings. I've watched on TV when I'm not here. People, in life, people don't agree. I think that would be a hard part. There's respect. And I think at the end of the day, board members can sit at a table and have an argument and disagree to the end of the day, but you walk out in the parking lot and you have your smile and you still respect that person. You would agree to disagree. I think sometimes the biggest challenge would be, as you all know, sometimes I get heated because I get very passionate about subjects. And it's not because I think I'm right and everyone else is wrong, but I look at like the struggles, for example, that I've gone through with my son, and I've been very fortunate. I can honestly say I have no complaints about his team right now, but then I see other parents who have gone through struggles and who I've talked to and who are wanting to come to the board, and I think that's where maybe I would have to take that step back and compartmentalize, which I've gotten pretty decent so far at doing, but that would be a challenge. I think just the human side, my human side comes out. I think that would be the challenge. I'd have to just kind of pinch my leg under the table or something. I wouldn't be disrespectful. It's not that I would think, oh my gosh, you're wrong, but I get passionate. That would be a challenge.
Thank you. Mr. Buck?
I think I'll echo some of the other candidates in saying probably my biggest challenge would be, as a new member of the board, getting to know the policies and procedures, getting to know the system quickly, because this is a shortened term. But I think I could overcome that, like I've overcome most professional challenges, by immersing myself, talking to those with the answers, researching, reading, doing all sorts of things like that. And then, related to the last question, another challenge is always dealing with the voters, the students, teachers. I think I'm well equipped to handle that. I'm a labor relations manager, so every day I'm working on behalf of the company, with the union. So I've got multiple stakeholders. I've got the operations folks, the union, got to think about labor laws, what the contract says, presented with problems, a wide range of problems, as I'm sure you can all imagine, personnel issues and whatnot. Have to research the issue, figure out what's going on, what does the contract say, how's it been interpreted historically, and then come up with a plan, argue the case, fight the grievance if it comes to that, so on and so forth. So that's the type of skill set that I would bring to the board to try to overcome any challenges like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the fifth question now, which will start with Ms. Gonzalez Parker. What do you understand to be the primary responsibilities of the Board of Education? What do you understand to be the responsibilities of an individual member of the Board of Education?
Okay. I will start with myself as a potential board member. I feel like it's my responsibility to represent the voices of everybody in the district and all parties involved. So that includes administrators, teachers, my fellow board members, and then people in the community who no longer have children in school as well. They're important members of the community, and I feel like sometimes they are overlooked. So I would take that responsibility to, take everybody into account very seriously. I think that our role as a school board is actually in part dictated by the state policy, right? Don't they, I read that earlier, they tell us what we should do, what we should work on, what our goals are, but within that, we do have the flexibility to establish our own philosophy, and Guilderland already has one. So in terms of that, I see my role also as seeing that through. It really is a beautiful mission that the board has. It's a great philosophy, and I would like to see that through. I also see myself as being an agent for change, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. There are many things. I wouldn't have decided to raise my children here if I were unhappy with the district. But I think what makes a district great is that they have that flexibility to change and try something new once in a while. So I also would see my role on the board as learning from neighboring districts who are doing wonderful things like having a later start time, having things like lab school, which builds a community inside this large school district, and hopefully, keep so many students from applying to private schools or other programmings because we have them here at the school now instead. So I hope to be an innovator.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. McKinney, you're up.
I see the board as a group of individuals that collectively make decisions that influence the community and the students and the education for this district. I think that it's important that the board work together and develop that cohesive idea or plan so that the district can move forward. I think that also as a board, you need to be able to disagree agreeably, and then at the end of the day, walk out as one. Because I think that when you walk out as a split board, then the community divides itself. As for myself, as a member of the board, I feel that the best thing that I can do is, one, listen, and two, give everyone my understanding and expertise of my years in education and all the different things that I read and learn about. I read education magazines every day. I get them online. It's important to me to stay current, and I have two daughters that are educators, so I talk to them. So I think that that's part of the whole plan.
All right, thank you. Ms. Blasiak?
Yes, I see the board as volunteers that had something that, like the five of us here, sparked them to put their name in. I see the board as, you have to, like everyone has said, you have to follow certain NYSBA standards. You have to follow what they say. You have to go to their trainings. You have certain standards that you have to follow. You have to work with your administrators. You have to work with your teachers, with your students, with your community. You pretty much have to do this, and you don't get paid. I think that's amazing. That's kind of, and I'm not trying to say this just to say it, but I think that's an amazing position that I don't think people really think about. Any board of education in the state or across the country, it's that kind of governing body that really, instead of, you don't just get to sit there and just read something and make a decision. You have to actually submerge yourself in a lot of different things. And you have to go into your communities, and you have to listen to people, and you have to really do your research. And then at the end of the day, like everyone has said, you have to come forward as a united front. And as a member, I know that I personally, and as you all as well, you have your right to have your personal opinion, but as a board member, you represent the school board. And that is something where you come out, and that's where I mentioned before, compartmentalizing things, where you're a parent, or you're an educator, or you're a nurse, a doctor. You all come from different backgrounds, but you're all here for the same thing. And as a Board of Ed member, if I were on the board, I would look at it the same way. Like, we all come from different backgrounds. We are expected to not only follow the NYSBA procedures and rules that come down the pipeline, but to represent our community and represent our school district in the best way possible. And as a possible member, or if I were a member, I would have a level of pride about that. That's pretty amazing.
All right, thank you. Mr. Buck?
So I see the roles of the board as being good stewards of the district. It's the board's responsibility to make sure that the Guilderland Central School District continues to do well, continues to improve. And I think one of the goals of the board should be that The district should always be left better when you leave than it was when you came. And I think that collectively should be one of the roles and the goals of the board. Individually, I think individual members need to be leaders by example. So if they want to be those good stewards, they have to put the work in. If they believe in something, they need to convince others of that. Lead by example. It's a important tenet in the Marine Corps, and I definitely live by that. But that, yeah. Excuse me, I'm losing my place. I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Butterfield, you're up.
I think the purpose of the board ultimately is to advocate for children, to advocate for the children of the district to attain their highest educational possibility. I think to accomplish that goal, each individual member should be respectful, responsible, and educated. So every member of the board should be an active listener to all of the stakeholders who are coming to the table with issues to be brought to the board. I think we have to be responsible stewards, both fiscally and both fiscally and in terms of advocating a forward-thinking interest for children in the district. I think individual members of the board should educate themselves on the issue, vociferously, argue amongst each other, but then as other people have stated, I think members of the board should leave as one once the final decision is made.
All right, thank you. We're moving on to the sixth question now, which will start with Mr. McKinney. The district has spent time working on building more culturally responsive and inclusive schools. What are your thoughts on this?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, of course. The district has spent time working on building more culturally responsive and inclusive schools. What are your thoughts on this?
Having been a special ed teacher and dealt with inclusion for many years, I feel that that's a vital thing, whether you're including the special ed population into the general ed population, or if you're bringing other cultural kinds of inclusion in. I think building a culture within the school district is something that's very necessary, because each school itself has to have its own culture, and then as you merge those elementary schools into the middle school, you now have to build a bigger culture, and then as it goes into the high school, it forms even a larger kind of culture where we have to be able to help students to understand why it's necessary for everyone to be included as part of the community.
All right, Ms. Blasiak, you're up.
Yes, loaded question for me. For inclusion and cultural responsiveness, I actually pulled out my paperwork here because this is something that on the building cabinet at the middle school we've talked about, and I really truly believe that before we even have that conversation, the district, and I'm just saying in general, needs to have a definition that is clear across the board, because I think that both terms are something that means something different to all people. And I absolutely love that we do with our cultures. We have different cultures in different schools and different communities. But this is something also where we need to be able to provide the supports for all of this to be put in place, where our teachers have what they need to be able to implement things in the schools, where we should be pulling our students who are already having these conversations on their own and taking a little bit of a lead from them, especially on cultural responsiveness, because it's a tough topic for a lot of adults at times, but when you talk to the students, it's something where it's just kind of naturally happening. And I think sometimes the adults kind of have a tendency to mess it up. So, I mean, with inclusion, of course, I am all for it. I have a son with special needs. This is something that I have been very vocal about, where I think that every student deserves the right to have an education, but also with, like, in class with their friends, where they're not being pulled out, where the teachers are actually getting the supports they need for these students so they're not flailing, so the teachers aren't getting frustrated. And then so it all just seems to not work when really it just a conversation might need to be had. With cultural responsiveness, that's something, like I said, and I have it circled here because this is from New York State, which this was their guidelines. I think that as a district, we need to set up a definition so we're all on the same page in order to move forward with these conversations, instead of just saying, okay, this is something we're going to talk about, this is something we're going to implement. I think it needs to be clear across the district what the plans are.
All right, thank you. Mr. Buck?
As I mentioned before, this I think is hugely important for everybody, and I'm glad to hear that the district is doing things to that end. I don't know exactly what those efforts are, but I'm glad to hear it. I think it's an important issue. If I'm going to be honest, I think it's one of the gaps that I had in my education throughout the Guilderland School District. And there's still a ton that I don't know, but I'm striving most days to educate myself, talk to people, reading literature, so on and so forth. But schools today are more segregated than they ever were in the past, and the Northeast has some of the most segregated school districts. And so again, if we're not able to provide our children with environments that are diverse, with different cultures and everything, then we need to find ways to teach them that. It's very important. It definitely sets you up and helps you throughout life because of the experiences you're going to have in the workplace, working with diverse people. People from many different backgrounds. I do a lot of training at work for discrimination, harassment, bullying, sexual harassment training, that sort of thing. And some of the questions I get when I'm doing those training kind of blows my mind. And I think that people need to be educated as children. And if they're not, then it can just lead to bad things down the road. So I'm really happy to hear that Guilderland is doing things like that. Again, I don't know the specifics of it, but I'm excited to hear, and I definitely think we need to continue to build on that and always try to improve that.
Thank you. Ms. Butterfield?
I think inclusion and cultural diversity are essential for our students. As I said earlier, I think a goal for the school board would be to advocate that all of our students become global citizens of the world. And in order to do that, they have to be exposed to people with differences. Like Kimberly said, I think actually our children are better at this than adults sometimes. I think the board and the school district should put supports in place to help this happen. But I do think children themselves are more innately better at it than sometimes the adults that surround them. But I do think it's very important, and I would support it. I do think actually the school district is much more diverse than I think you were pointing out when you went through. I think it's a goal that you can see being pushed in the district now, but like with anything, it could be improved.
All right, thank you. Ms. Gonzalez-Parker?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Of course. The district has spent time working on building more culturally responsive and inclusive schools. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay. So I think I'm going to echo what Kim said, which is that we need to define culture. I think in my generation, maybe we sort of thought that culture only meant ethnicity, and there are lots of different groups that thrive in their own culture, and we all need to be able to work together and learn from each other. I think some of this is happening organically. I think, I see the district as being much more diverse than it used to be. I was the only Latina in Westmere at the time, and then one of maybe 4 in my house in Taos Center where all the bad kids were. And, but now I think we have a very rich, very richly diverse community. That being said, I'm not sure that I would feel completely welcomed if I were a member of a particular culture here. We still get pushback from members in the community who are not open to all of the cultures right now that we are inviting into our community. So when I say cultures, I mean, related to your socioeconomic status, cultures of poverty, race, ethnicity, traditionally LGBTQ communities, differences in religion, things like that. You know, it's all coming together, and I see it, and it can be beautiful, but there's also pushback in some people that aren't ready for it. So I think there's a little bit of trial and error involved. I see it as the school district's responsibility and the board's responsibility to keep doing what they're doing, to be honest with you. They are trying to be more inclusive, and I think that that's a step in the right direction. So I remember when that email went out, and I was actually very happy about it. We've always done things like the cultural fair and things like that. I think if we were to expand our definition of what a culture is and include all these, different pockets, that would be great. I think the cultural fair, for example, is traditionally focused on ethnicity, and we just need to sort of break down those barriers.
All right, thank you. We're moving on to the 7th question now, which will start with Ms. Blasiak. Explain for the members of the Board of Education and the community why you are interested in serving on the board at this time, and what are your priorities for the district?
I've been interested actually in quite a while serving on the board. It's just a matter of when. But I wanted to put my hat in the ring. Like, this is something where I'm already very active in the community already. I already go to the board meetings. I already go to a lot of school events. I'm very active with PTA. I live by the PTA mantra of you advocate for every child. I truly take that to heart. That's why I really just want to be on the board. It's all, at the end of the day, about advocating for every single child in this district. And it's so hard because, like with the last question, we talk about inclusion and cultural diversity, and it encompasses so many different things. It's so hard now for our students, and not only our students, but I think anyone in education right now. It's just really difficult. It's kind of been a downturn since about 2012, 2013. But I really just want to make a difference in a little bit more. Like, I always want to add a little bit more. I always want to have a little bit more of a voice. I want to be part of a group that actually has a huge district voice. You represent the district. And it's just, to me, I really would love to be part of that, because we do have an amazing district. And there are things, of course, that we want to change and we want to work on. And I think that it would be crazy to say that there aren't, because change is inevitable. And that's something that, if you're afraid of change, then you shouldn't be in education as it is. It's a different animal nowadays. So I just would really, I would like to be part of that change and that advocacy for every single child in our district.
All right, thank you. Mr. Buck, you're up.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, I had a great experience here, so I would love to, also be a good steward of the district and help other people have that same experience that I had, including my daughter, who, before I know it, will be a student in the system. She's only 2, but 2 years felt like 2 minutes, as I'm sure all the parents know. So before I know it, she'll be a student here. And then, I just, as a citizen of the town, I would feel a responsibility to be a good steward of our community. And I think it would be an honor to serve on the board and be a part of that, and to try to make changes where changes are needed and try to protect things where institutions need to be protected. Talking about culture and inclusion and diversity, we talk about how difficult it is for a lot of people to talk about that, and I think one of the reasons it's so difficult is because we don't talk about it enough. And that starts at young ages in our schools, and that is definitely something I think needs to change, because if we don't talk about it, we can't recognize problems with it outside of school. And then if we don't recognize the problems, we can't fix it. So definitely, as I mentioned, I'm very interested and passionate about that topic. So, but I do think it would be an honor to serve on the board on behalf of the residents and the students, faculty, and everyone else. So thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Butterfield, you're up.
So I've been an advocate for children my entire professional life. Until my work with the school start time task force, I never really had gotten involved with policy making. And it was quite invigorating that a group of people working together are attempting to tackle this very large problem. And that's really what sort of inspired me to go forward with pursuing this. I think I could, help the board by providing a different perspective. So physical health is only one part of your overall health. And there's a lot of data that's been published more recently showing that overall children's health is impacted in just a very small fraction by their physical health. But their environment that they live in, their educational community, also has huge impacts on their health. And I think I could help bring that perspective and bring that expertise. I appreciate the opportunity, but I think that's what I could bring to this group.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez-Parker, you're up.
I believe wholeheartedly that the environment that a child learns in will dictate whether or not they learn and will reach their full potential. And I firmly believe that negative experiences along the way, you carry those with you into your professional life. I would make it my goal as a member of the board to work on that environmental component to the best of my ability. I think that I bring different perspectives. I have been the parent, I have been the student, I have sat at the table with policymakers. I understand the requirements at the state level. I'm an educator. I don't think I mentioned earlier, I have taught myself at UAlbany. I'm an adjunct instructor. I also feel like I bring a similar perspective to Dr. Butterfield with the health component, but also my background being in social behavior and community health. I feel like I'm well-versed on the New York State mental health system, on the infectious disease, things like flu, things like STDs, things like vaping, things like this request for nudes so that you can be bullied online. All those things are factors that are really interfering with what our kids are learning. And I would like to address those things, because if we don't address the environment, I feel like our kids aren't going to come out with the education that they need in the future. I just want to look at my notes. I also bring the interesting perspective of, which is one that people don't like to talk about, but I'm very comfortable speaking about, which is we live in a world that is looking at a whole new level of violence, and active shooter training and preparedness at the school level. I think it is variant, and I would argue that what's in place right now, not just in our district, but what is recommended across the state in some instances, may not be necessarily age appropriate or the best way to go. And so I think I offer an interesting perspective in that sense. For example, I think there are little kids right now, they're learning to hide in the classroom, right? They're all practicing that. I think that's valuable, but at the end of the day, they're so little that in the heat of the moment, are all of those hiding spaces created equally? I don't think so. If, cognitive development wise, how are we counting on somebody to be quiet and completely hide behind that bookcase? So I think it's up to the Board of Education and the school district as a whole and the community to think about barrier methods and look at age-appropriate interventions along the way that deal with safety and the environment.
Thank you. Mr. McKinney?
I think the reason that I chose to seek this position is because I've led a life of service to the community. Whether it was when I was in school, being a member of the Key Club, when I got older, I was at the Kiwanis and the Rotary. I served as a trustee of the Methodist Farm Sunday School Association and ended up being the president of that. When a vacancy showed up at the Westmere Fire Department for their board, I volunteered to fill that spot. I wasn't chosen, but now this spot has become available, and I thought that it's time for me to try something different. So I feel that I can bring many different viewpoints from my experiences in a small school district, because I've been involved in so many different things within that school district, that I can at least express those kinds of ideas to the other members of the board and listen to their thoughts so that we can build a better community here.
All right, thank you. That concludes all of our prepared questions. I'd like to thank all of you for your participation in this event. I'll now turn the meeting back to Ms. Rivera.
I just want to thank all the candidates for taking the time and coming to share your thoughts. And I don't know if I'm speaking for the rest of the board, but this is going to be really difficult because we have really great candidates. And so thank you again for coming. I think we need a motion to go into executive session. Barb? Second, Tim. We need to go into executive session to discuss persons and matters relating to the appointment of a person to fill the Board of Education vacancy. Thank you.
So impressed with all of you.
Good luck, everyone.
Feeling is mutual.